FactUp Realm presents Trump's Tariff Strategy, a path to economic sovereignty or the seed of global tensions. Introduction: Free trade versus economic nationalism. The table showcasing tariffs imposed by different countries on U.S. imports has become one of Donald Trump's key visual arguments in justifying his trade policy. But this is not just a simple chart, it is a roadmap for a new economic doctrine, reshaping America's role in global trade. Trump's use of this data is a call to arms, demanding a rewrite of the global rules of commerce. Part 1. Why is Trump imposing these tariffs? What are his real goals? 1. Primary goal: trade balance in numerical terms. Trump has repeatedly criticized the trade deficit between the U.S. and countries like China, Germany, Japan, and Mexico. He sees the trade deficit, e.g. $383 billion with China in 2022, as a symptom of unfair trade. To counter it, his primary tool is tariffs, especially on cheap Asian imports, in hopes of narrowing the deficit. 2. Secondary goal: bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. By raising import costs, Trump expects U.S. companies to bring production back home, American consumers to buy more domestic goods, job growth in sectors like steel, auto manufacturing, and textiles. 3. Long-term goal: geopolitical leverage against rivals. Tariffs are not just economic tools, they are geopolitical weapons. Trump uses them to pressure China on intellectual property and tech transfers, push European countries to spend more on NATO defense, force developing nations to sign bilateral trade deals with the U.S. Part 2. Real-world effects of tariffs, so far, with tangible examples. Example 1. The steel industry. In 2018, after a 25% tariff on imported steel, companies like U.S. Steel profited, but automakers and appliance manufacturers had to pay more for materials. Production costs rose, and so did final prices for American consumers. Example 2. American farmers. Following Chinese tariffs on soybeans and corn, soybean exports in 2019 fell to a 10-year low. Thousands of farmers in Iowa, Wisconsin, and Nebraska faced bankruptcy. The federal government allocated $28 billion in direct subsidies, ultimately paid by taxpayers. Example 3. The tech sector. Much of America's tech industry relies on imported chips and components from Taiwan, China, and South Korea. Companies like Apple and Cisco either raised product prices or shifted supply chains to countries like India and Vietnam, an expensive and slow process. Part 3. Strategic forecasts. What happens if these policies continue? Scenario 1. Trump maintains tariffs through year 1, 2025. Domestic impact: gradual rise in the price of everyday goods, appliances, clothing, electronics. Import-driven inflation: potential interest rate hikes to manage inflation. Weakened consumer purchasing power, especially for middle-class families. International reactions: China and the EU may impose retaliatory tariffs in coordination. Southeast Asian nations, e.g. Vietnam, Malaysia, may benefit temporarily as companies relocate. The WTO faces mounting pressure and risks becoming irrelevant. Scenario 2. Full-term implementation through a 4-year presidency. Inside the U.S., revival of heavy industries like steel may work, but only in energy-rich states. Widening class divisions as low-income families bear most of the price burden. An exodus of businesses to Mexico or tariff-free countries due to unsustainable production costs. Severe slowdown in tech investment due to trade instability. Globally, the emergence of an anti-U.S. trade bloc. China, Russia, Iran, India, and Latin America form alternatives. New economic alliances like BRICS Plus could adopt a currency independent of the U.S. dollar. WTO fractures or collapses. China becomes the new leader in global trade governance in the absence of an active U.S. Scenario 3. Strategic pullback or adjustment due to internal and external pressures. If inflation spikes, or if key allies distance themselves from the U.S., the White House may scale back or freeze selected tariffs. A pivot back to multilateral trade agreements with Europe and Japan becomes likely. Tariffs remain in Trump's playbook but are used more as negotiation threats than actual tools. Part 4. Real threats and strategic opportunities. Threats: undermining the U.S. dollar's dominance in global trade, weakening America's ability to set global standards, eroding strategic alliances, NATO, G7, rising unemployment in export-heavy industries. Opportunities: resurgence of neglected sectors, e.g. heavy equipment manufacturing, partial independence in vital supply chains, e.g. pharmaceuticals, medical devices, strategic leverage against China in tech, data, and cyber disputes. Final thoughts. Does Trump really know what he's doing? Trump may play with numbers and charts, but economic reality is not governed by figures alone. Tariffs, when used without a comprehensive vision, become a ticking time bomb for both economic stability and geopolitical balance. Rather than remaining the global champion of free trade, Trump's vision turns America into a fortress of resistance, yet in a world governed by networks, not battlefields. Does Trump decide based on emotion or strategy? One of the most important questions often asked and often feared is this: could Donald Trump make these tariff decisions emotionally, despite having access to top-tier advisors, economists, and trade strategists? If the answer is yes, emotion overrides expertise. If Trump primarily follows instinct rather than expert advice, policies may fluctuate unpredictably based on political pressures or personal rivalries. Foreign governments and investors may lose trust in the stability of U.S. policy. This could create economic whiplash. Industries reacting to rapid, unexpected changes without time to adapt. Global markets could brace for shockwaves every time a new tariff is announced on social media or during a rally. If the answer is no, strategy drives policy. But if his decisions are calculated, advised, and structured, the U.S. may be undergoing a strategic shift toward economic realism rather than idealistic globalism. A new model of selective globalization could emerge, protecting certain industries while liberalizing others. Allies and rivals alike would need to negotiate under new American terms, shifting the center of trade dialogue back to Washington. Which is it, really? Perhaps neither extreme fully captures the truth. Trump is both impulsive and calculating, guided by gut feelings, but backed by a loyal network of experts who frame those instincts into policy. In the end, whether this results in economic success or systemic instability, only time can tell. Does anyone actually benefit from these trade conflicts? Yes, some do. Corporations with domestic monopolies may thrive under protectionism. Lobbyists and industry leaders who influence tariff targets may gain market advantage. Political operatives may use nationalistic rhetoric to mobilize voter bases, distracting from deeper issues. But the average citizen? Not necessarily. Which leads to a deeper question. What should ordinary people do, and when? Awareness is key. Citizens should monitor not just slogans, but actual data and outcomes. Educated voting matters. Supporting candidates who offer thoughtful, transparent economic strategies is essential. Collaboration over isolation. Local businesses, labor unions, and consumer groups should unite to influence trade policy in their favor. Are the critics of these policies truly concerned about the nation, or just their interests? It's a question worth asking. Are the loudest critics genuinely worried about America's future, or just about their profits? The answer varies. Some economists, NGOs, and institutions criticize Trump's policy because they believe in global cooperation, rule-based trade, and long-term growth. But some corporations and investors oppose these tariffs simply because it threatens their bottom line, not necessarily the national interest. What if Trump's vision actually works? Let's assume for a moment that Trump's trade war strategy unfolds exactly as he hopes. American factories boom. Job creation surges in forgotten towns. China compromises on technology transfers and currency policies. The U.S. regains industrial strength and self-reliance. In that case, history may look back at Trump not as a disruptor, but as a trade reformer who reshaped the global economy and forced the world to play fair. But until that day comes, we live in a state of suspense, watching, analyzing, and questioning every move. At FactUp Realm, we don't tell you what to think. We help you think deeply. The story of tariffs, trade, and Trump is more than a headline. It's a mirror reflecting global fears, ambitions, and turning points. So ask yourself, are we witnessing a necessary correction in global economics, or the start of something far more volatile? There are no final answers here, just questions worth your time, your mind, and your voice. If this gave you a new perspective, follow FactUp Realm for more. And if you believe others should hear this too, share it, because awareness, not noise, shapes the future.